All right, so I want to talk about the Sabbath and lessons we fail to learn from the Sabbath, or some of us fail to learn. All right, because this has dire consequences. It really does. It has very dire consequences. And this message, so I'm gonna just tell you a quick story. There's a kind of stories I know of. So there's a couple of people I know of who were anointed people of God who worked in miracle ministries who overworked themselves. They overworked themselves and they end up passing away early because they overworked themselves. Um, it is what it is, and I think this is because they didn't grasp the principles of the Sabbath. All right, now this message is for two types of people, or just one type of person, really. One, if you know somebody who don't know how to rest, and number two, if you don't know how to rest. So either one, like if you don't know somebody and you do, I mean, I'm sorry, if you're the person, or if you don't know or if you know of a person like this is for you. All right, so I'm gonna just read a couple scriptures and then I'm gonna just elaborate from there. So it's going to be ooh, Hebrews 4:9 through 11. All right, so we did just start. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God, for he that entered into his rest also hath ceased from his own work, as God did from his. All right, as God did from his. Interesting. Let us labor to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. All right. Now we know this is talking about the works, the grace works thing. Like we're not supposed to be. It's not our works, but His works through us, kind of thing. But this principle does apply to kind of the Sabbath because it's kind of like the Sabbath was like a foreshadow of this. But um, nevertheless, let's just talk about the history of it. Just a brief history, just for a little bit, just so we can get some context. So, in the very beginning, there was 6 days, and then the seventh God rested. All right. And then in the 6th day he could create man, and then the seventh day he rests. So it's like almost like man's whole first full day was a day of rest. All right. So this was around before the law, before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, before the even the flood. And then after that, a while when they created the law, when God instituted the law after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and during the days of Moses, when Moses wanted to learn the ways of God, he said he talked about remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Uh, Interesting enough, they had to remember it. Then and then it talks about the Sabbath, like I think it's like I think Exodus 20 or 20 something one. I forget which one. But when they gave the Ten Commandments, but they was talking about God worked 6 days, and then he himself labored the sixth day. I mean the seventh day. He himself labored as a pattern for us. Then he instituted, like for Israel, he instituted other Sabbaths, like um, every seventh year, in like the year of Jubilee, and various feast days. These were also other Sabbaths. So God wanted to, in it was like working on a Sabbath was God has some, like working on a Sabbath has some very severe consequences, and we know that Israel, like he told Israel to work, like when it was in the wilderness and gathering manna, they had to work on the 6th day. They gathered twice as much because they was kind of living by faith. They gathered twice as much, so on the seventh day they could rest, and like they would try to gather extra on the other days, and it'll get spoiled. But interesting enough, they wouldn't spoil when they would get twice as much for the Sabbath day on the 6th day. And these are all important principles. Now, what I want to talk about is just the principle of resting, not necessarily resting in the Lord, but taking taking days off, just taking days off from your work. All right, just that kind of rest. All right, and this does require faith too. This does require faith. All right. But there's several different ways people they think they're resting. I mean, they're resting, but they're not fully resting like the Sabbath. Because Sabbath, you weren't really allowed to do anything. All right, remember that Sabbath was a lot. If you were resting like you were in the Sabbath, you weren't really allowed to do any kind of labor. You did all your labor the day before. You cooked, you cleaned, you cooked, you cleaned, you gathered all your food up the day before, and so that day, everything was prepared for the day before. So then that day, you didn't really do much of anything. All right, you didn't really do much of anything. I mean, oh, like you could probably pray for somebody. You could pray for somebody, or if somebody was in trouble, you can help them out. But generally speaking, you didn't do anything. All right. So there's days off. Like, so one thing you do is people do is they take days off work. Now, days off work doesn't mean you're resting that day. That does not mean you're resting that day. Sometimes you have family obligations you take care of. Sometimes you have just around the house of work you taking care of. And sometimes you're on vacation. But then sometimes our vacation could be very, 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 very labor intensive also. So and then you can work out or whatever. This is not really this is a day off is not necessarily, but can be a day of rest. Then there's the light day. All right, the light day at work where you don't do much. This is not like the Sabbath either, but sometimes we need those. Sometimes we can't get a full day. Sometimes we gotta just take a light day. And as far as days off is concerned from the job, sometimes we need to take a break from one thing and work on another so we can have so distance ourselves from that thing so we can prosper it on so it can so we can do a better job at getting so we can have fresh eyes when we come back to that thing. We'll put it like that. Then there's a day we sleep in. This is not necessarily a day you take off, but this may be, or maybe even a rest day, but light day, but it could be. But it's a day where you just sleep in. Sometimes, like when sometimes we're not really. Sometimes, like when I'm like coming down with a little bit of a headache, I have to make sure I'm sleeping like 8 or 9 hours. The next day, it's like, okay, something's coming on, and I need to just sleep. And I still go to work or something like that, but I just need to sleep a little extra today because I know this is my body telling me that there's some rest needed. All right. And then there's actually the actual Sabbath where you just take the day completely off. All right. And this is what I'm talking about. A lot of times when you tell people to take the day completely off, they'd be like, oh, I took off work or I slept in or I had a light day. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about like the Sabbath where you need to just take the day fully off. And a lot of times I'll be like, man, just do that once a month or something like that. Now, there's sometimes with seasons where where you just have to do one of the others because you don't really have time, especially when you have children, really young children. But this is something to be really, really mindful of because a lot of times when we don't take the day fully off, we overwork ourselves and then we end up, you can end up dying early or getting sick. All right. A lot of times when you are sick, you just need to just chill and just take that day off and take that day off or take 2 days off and get yourself better so you can come back stronger. Like there was this people at my job who would be sick there was this lady at my job who was sick a long time and she was just like, well, I had to come to work. And it's like, no, you didn't have to come to work. We told like they give us 2 days off in a row and they counted as one for a reason. And me and a guy named Frank at my job, he was just telling them like, look, we was just like at the time, this is a while ago. We was like, look, we take those 2 days off, we'll get ourselves better. So when we come to work, we won't stay sick. And a lot of times people be like, they thinking they're doing something honorable. And it's like what I told my boy at my job because he wouldn't take his 15-minute breaks. He was just like, I don't want to take it. And I was like, you're going to take it one way or the other. Either you're going to slow down, so you're going to effectively take it, or you're just going to take it and then come back fresh so you can work hard. But either way, you're going to take it. And a lot of times that's what people do. They end up taking those rest days because they end up passing away early, and they take more rest than they probably would have if they just took those days off. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So this is just an important principle for those who are overworking themselves. Now, those who ain't working much, this is not really applying to you or whatever. But anyways, so there's several different situations that while we don't fully have the rest that we probably should. One, we haven't asked. We haven't asked God for it. We haven't asked because we haven't thought, or we don't believe that he's going to do it. And sometimes we have not because we ask not. A lot of times we haven't prepared. We haven't properly prepared. We're like the virgins who didn't have the oil in their lamp, so they try to get the oil in the last minute. But so they even haven't prepared is because they haven't like prepared. They haven't saved up or something, or they haven't prepared the resources for it because they were either irresponsible or they just didn't think to do it. Another one, they haven't prepared the they haven't discipled people to take over their job for them. They haven't done it. They haven't prepared other people to take over the work so they can lead. And this applies to even raising kids too. Like a lot of times, a lot of people aren't raising their kids right nowadays, so they have to do everything for their kids. They have to do everything for their kids, and so they're really really wearing themselves out. And it's just like, well, that's your fault because you haven't really trained your. This Bible talks about training your child. You haven't trained your child. You just gave your child stuff, or just told them to go to school, but really haven't created make sure they're competent in anything. So they're effectively useless. So you have to do everything for them. It's still a child. Children are smarter than you think. I remember, no, like people be like, kids aren't that. I mean, kids don't know any better about doing certain things. I remember knowing better when I was 9, and I wasn't necessarily the smartest kid around either. I was average, and I knew, and we all knew better when I was 9 to do a lot of stuff. All right, they can cook, they can clean, they could do a lot of stuff. All right, they used to, these kids, or you just train the oldest one and then neglect the youngest one, which happens a lot. And so you just you're babying your kids, and this is why you have. And sometimes this leads into adulthood where you just become an enabler. And a lot of times enablers die early because they're exhausted and their kids burn them out. Another way, in one way you can tell a toxic relationship is when somebody won't allow you a day off. They won't allow you a day off, even though you have things set up where it will be fine if you go. They won't allow you a day off. That's a way you can tell a toxic relationship, or they have a toxic tie to you where you need to deal with that because they won't allow you a day off. All right. A lot of these people want to do everything themselves, and they don't. And sometimes they don't have trust in their disciples. Sometimes people can do it and they don't have trust. They don't have trust in the people that they give people power to, which gets into the last thing. They don't have trust in other people, and they don't have trust in God. Because a lot of times the Bible talks about laboring into getting to the rest. So you will be creating disciples, preparing, saving up, preparing resources, and like things of this nature. And then we also prepare our faith. So then when the time comes, we can just let someone else handle it. And this is why a lot of works fail, because we haven't labored into so it can last without us. Like Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad talked about this when it comes to business. He's like a business from the like there's like from the like he's like there's small business and there's big businesses. He's like big business, a real big business you can step away from for a year and it'll function fine. And we should be able to step away from sometimes we should be able to step away from certain things for a short period of time, and it should run fine. And if we're not, and if we can't, we haven't done a good job of creating disciples or training people to do what we do. Some people don't do are deliberately not training people so they can because they want to stay in power or whatever. But my point is this: we spoke like I understand like that passage wasn't really talking about like and I'm not really talking about we need a literal Sabbath or anything like that. This is not about that. This is just about making sure you rest and knowing what that looks like. Sometimes you need a day completely off. I remember just living with someone. I don't know if I said this before, where um, like once every few years, they would take everybody in the house would just sleep. Not me, but everybody in the immediate family would sleep just all day. And I know sometimes when I'm sick, I need to sleep all day so I can recover. I can recover. Now, if you're not working real hard, this probably don't really apply to you like that. But we need to understand what that Sabbath for and why God was very serious about us getting our rest. Very serious. And this is like a law, a physical law, just like it's like a physical law of the land where you need to allow the land rest. in order. And God said to have this in the Bible too, but it was a physical law where you need to allow the land rest in order for it to fully grow. It's a physical law of your body where you don't want to work out your body, that same body part every day. You don't want to do that if you want it to maximize your growth. If you want to maximize your potential and stuff in certain things, you need to be able to. You should be able to have days off. If you don't, you're not maximizing your potential. You're probably going to get your work is going to get cut short. I talked about enablers before, but enablers a lot of times they end up getting drained and burnt out or die early, and then when they get out the way, that's when the person could fully develop. It's just like, okay, you weren't operating in faith. You weren't operating in faith. You was operating in fear, um, underneath it all, and this is why you didn't let them fully develop um, and things of this nature. This is like why you just didn't hand it over to me. This is why you just kept your hand on it, and this is why you had to leave this work early so your hand could take it off so I could move. But anyways, yeah, this is. I just want to just point and just talk about. I just wanted to just bring this up. This is just something that was on my mind. We have to, like, just because we're not under law and we don't have to do the Sabbath like they did, doesn't mean that the principles of the Sabbath is not needed. Sometimes, like when, like one of one of my best friends, I had to be like, when she would take the day off from work or something, she'd be like, "Well, I'm clean." I'm like, "That's not what I'm talking about. You need to rest, literally rest, like literally just don't do anything, or just don't do any. Like you're not taking care. That's a day you don't take care of any business whatsoever. Anything that's not done is not done. Make sure you rest. I mean, you can do something you like, maybe visit somebody or chill at somebody's house or something like that. Take a walk or painting or maybe gardening or something like that. But don't do anything strenuous and don't do anything that is as far as taking care of business. You need that day off because it's not just good for your body, but it's good for your mind. And this is why a lot of us, our healing doesn't take place within us because we're acting outside of God's will. And we're overworking ourselves. Like we don't necessarily have to do it every week, but we should do it very, very frequently. I mean, we should do it periodically. We really should. I often recommend once a month, but um, it definitely should. It definitely should happen on a regular basis. But anyways, that's all I really have to say. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Peace.